Hello, once again, this is Antonio, and I'm coming at you with another exciting video. Now, have you ever noticed in America, if you ever come to America to visit, or if you're living in America, that they have, like, for example, Little Italy, you got Chinatown, Koreatown, you even have like Germantown, Russian town, but you never seem to notice or see any type of Black America town. In America, I consider myself a Black American or just plain American at that. I don't delineate because I'm proud of my country, but we sometimes got to pull back the scab and really understand some of um, the traumas and that adversities that a lot of Black people experience. And what we are speaking about is seven different towns, seven different times. Black communities were destroyed, either flooded or they had to be given up by eminent domain. And some of these places are now either airports, lakes, huge tourist attractions, and it's just a bad thing when we don't even have a place where we got a designated place for, like I said, a Black American town. We don't have that. That doesn't exist in America. And people that come here, they don't understand the culture. All they see is some of the crimes that some of the Black Americans created, or other other groups of people create, because we are not the only people that commit crime here in America. So without further ado, I'm going to play seven different times, seven different videos on how towns, places were Black towns, and they were taken over. So we did have Black American areas, but they were destroyed. So without further ado, let's go ahead and share my screen so you can get a better understanding of what I'm trying to say. So let's go and play the first video. And the first video is actually Dulles Airport. Dulles Airport, or what sits as Dulles Airport, was a Black American town. It was the village of Willard. And we're going to get some straightness and understandings of what I'm referencing in this video. So let's go ahead and play.
International Airport was built, there was a village on the site that had been there since the early 1900s. And tonight we're hearing directly from one of the residents who lived in the village of Willard before it was condemned.
So our Alexis Wainwright shows us how people from that community are working with the airport to capture the important aspects of Virginia's rich history.
It's a story of a forgotten community and its Black residents. Before this was Dulles International Airport, it was the village of Willard, Virginia.
But you were born here, is that correct?
That's correct. I was born in the small village of Willard. From my father's recollection, I was born maybe a 16th of a mile from where I'm now standing.
Louis Jett can explain every inch of what the town that once stood here represented.
This whole, I'd say 3 or 4, 8 or 10 acres is all Willard. This is Willard.
He was up here until the age of 8, and he's kept every single memory stowed away in this binder that he dons on weekly. Jett says it was an all-Black town full of life.
It was actively occupied up until about 1957, 1958, when the FAA, the precursor to the FAA, was looking for a place for international airport.
Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority are...
So you clearly see what happened here. In this regard, they were looking for a place to build an airport. So what they had to do is they had to give up the area possibly for eminent domain. Let's carry on. So they took over the area. It was a vibing area. So that's why I say when people get the chance to migrate to America and you get a chance to have your own area, your Koreatown, your Russian town, your Little Korea, Little Italy, Chinatown, you have Japantown, you have all of this stuff. But you notice that Black Americans don't have it, and that's because it was stolen from us or taken from us by force. But let's carry on.
Archaeologist Henry Ward says they found evidence of what used to be.
That was occupied, we believe, again, not only by a black family, but probably an enslaved family that would have been associated with the Lee plantation. And so some of the artifacts we found on that site are really quite evocative. Some of them are rock crystals.
But Willard was cleared out around 1958.
And they realized that there were some, I think, hundreds of buildings, farms, the village of Willard, all out here. All of those properties were basically went through a legal protection to go ahead and have them condemned through eminent domain. The property owners were paid compensation. How fair it was can be a question.
A question that Jet can answer.
The government sent my father and mother a letter saying our land was condemned. The date was September 1958, and we had to be gone by September 1958.
He says they were paid a little over $8,000 for their two-story house that his dad built himself and their land. And now 3 airport runways meet where Willard used to be.
We think about Loudoun as this, really progressive and dynamic and modern county. And we may not realize that there is a very long and rich history, yes, of African Americans who were enslaved, but also of African Americans who, once freed, were entrepreneurial, they bought land, they built tight-knit communities.
And now this history will be displayed in an exhibit where it once stood tall and proud. Alexis Wainwright, WUSA 9.
So you clearly see that Dallas Airport was once the village of Willard. So you can see when people come to this country, all you can do is see what's live and live in color. But Black Americans, we had our own communities. It wasn't like we were. Stop thinking that Black Americans' history stopped with slavery. We have been in this country for 10,000 years. We have been in this country for 10,000 years. All right, but nevertheless, let's go to the next video. All right, so the next video that we want to discuss is Oscarville, but you may know it as it exists now because it's Lake Lanier. Lake Lanier has a dark history. That's one of the most deadliest lakes in Georgia. It claimed least a life or 2 every year, and it's not a laughing matter, but you would never get me to swim out there. What happened to Oscarville, it was a thriving town. And what happened was it was a KKK raid. And with that KKK raid, it was then taken over, right? So let's go to play this video.
Taking a closer look at an all-black town in Georgia called Oscarville.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about this on social media for the last few years. And if you haven't heard of it, it's probably because it no longer exists. It's buried under Lake Lanier. 11 Alive's Latasha Gibbons has more.
When we started working on this story, we set out to track down descendants of Oscarville. Weeks later, we found a family who could trace back their roots 4 generations. They shared with us stories that were handed down about what the all-black town was like, including the night that led to its destruction. It was set on fire by night riders after they say a white woman was raped. Then later, it was covered by the body of water we now know as Lake Lanier. May Crow is buried here at this Gainesville cemetery, but the trail of destruction following her death stretches into the land surrounding Forsyth County, buried beneath these waves of Lake Lanier, where in 1912 nearly every black resident was forced out. That includes people living in an old black town called Oscarville. The community was formed in the late 1800s during the Reconstruction era.
There was a very strong community feeling among the blacks. About 300 children that went to some of the schools that were the black schools, and it was closely connected to the churches.
Georgia history teacher Lisa Crosby says Oscarville was a thriving black community, full of carpenters, blacksmiths, and bricklayers, but farming was the top trade.
So they really had kind of a miraculous farming growth here while the rest of the state was really struggling.
But then residents were abruptly forced off their land.
Well, the flashpoint, I think, is 1912.
This takes us back to the death of May Crow. The 19-year-old white woman was found dead in the woods near Oscarville, presumably after being raped.
Typically, the answer to white girls being raped was go to the black community and just start blaming people.
By nightfall, terror began to reign over Oscarville.
So from there, the rage and hatred in the community, mobs got together and they were called night riders, and they were riding throughout Oscarville and driving out the black community.
And the night turned deadly. You know, they were waking up by fires outside, fire bombs thrown in the church.
Filmmaker Bob Mackey recaptures those horrific nights in an upcoming television series.
Anytime anything happened, guess where everyone would go? To the church. Well, they attacked the church. People were hung, lynched.
Mackey's series features stories of direct descendants like George Rucker, who can trace his family back 4 generations to Oscarville. He tells the story of his great-grandfather, Bert Oliver, and the entire family being forced off their land.
Night riders came through. They had to leave everything. The main thing they left was property, and my grandfather had 100 acres.
Rucker says many relatives died as they tried to flee.
So when they got to the Chattahoochee River, from what I understand, they were told, when the mob got up on the bridge, they were told that they either had to swim or drown. Most of them didn't make it. My grandfather was one of them that did make it. He lost some brothers and sisters.
He says his relatives who survived settled in Gainesville.
From what my mother told me, Bert Oliver, he would sit and tell her this story, and he would just sit and cry.
Crosby says whites in the area took over the remaining properties. She says Oscarville farmers were specifically skilled in raising poultry, which set the pace for Gainesville eventually becoming poultry capital of the world.
You have a farm already going, and you had free land, so you just take it.
Rucker says his great-grandfather married his second wife, Beulah, and they built this school that still stands in Gainesville today. By the late 1950s, the Beaufort Dam was built and Lake Lanier was formed, covering up Oscarville and swallowing most of its history. Many believe Lake Lanier is haunted because of the high number of drownings. We spoke to officials who tell us because there is an entire town that includes structures and even forest areas with trees that are 60 feet tall, it makes it more difficult to navigate through, and someone can easily become trapped in debris, leading them to drowning. We have so much more on this story on our website.
All right, so let's go to our next video. And this takes place in Sugar Hill, which is now part of I-10. I-10 in Los Angeles, Sugar Hill, was once a prominent black neighborhood, but now it's just it's a concrete jungle where cars ride through every single day. Here's another case of eminent domain where this black folk, where the black population had to give up their land. Let's carry on.
Previously, the wealthiest black neighborhood in Los Angeles, construction of the 10 cut Sugar Hill in half in the 1960s. Despite residents' protests, the highway took hundreds of homes with it. Located to the west of downtown, on the border between Central and South Los Angeles, the area that became known as Sugar Hill is in the larger neighborhood of West Adams. West Adams is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city of Los Angeles, with most of its buildings erected between 1880 and 1945. Prior to construction of the freeway, West Adams had been connected to downtown LA via the Los Angeles Railway streetcar system, an electric tram network operating on-street. Additionally, Pacific Electric Interurbans provided service across the region at large in a mix of private rights-of-way and street running. Sugar Hill was originally known as West Adams Heights. Prior to the 1940s, black people were technically barred from living in the area due to the presence of restrictive covenants. A restrictive covenant was a clause written into the deed of a home which permitted it to be sold to, quote, members of the Caucasian race only. Despite these covenants, beginning in the 1910s as upper-class whites began leaving West Adams for new developments on the west side and in Beverly Hills. A rising black upper class moved in defiance of the covenants. Most prominent among these new residents were actors and performers, including Hattie McDaniel, the first black woman to win an Oscar, actress and community activist Louise Beavers, and singer, actress, and Broadway star Ethel Waters. McDaniel's house in particular became the social center of Sugar Hill. Her biographer writes, "The best of black show business performed within the walls of 2203 South Harvard. Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Count Basie, and more." At this time, West Adams was popularly rechristened Sugar Hill in honor of the legendary neighborhood in Harlem. The larger West Adams area became a center of black wealth. In response to this ascendant black elite, in 1945, white residents sued to enforce the restrictive covenants and evict black families from Sugar Hill. Black residents fought back. McDaniel took a leading role in this fight, teaming with NAACP attorney Lauren Miller to organize the neighborhood's legal defense. In opening arguments, the attorneys for the white plaintiffs insisted that the black West Adams residents were in violation of the law, that restrictive covenants were protected under the Constitution, and that the black property owners must be required to surrender their homes immediately. Lauren Miller countered with what at the time was a shocking argument. He immediately moved to bar any testimony by or on behalf of the plaintiffs, arguing that restrictive covenants violated both the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which mandated equal protection under the law, and the California State Constitution. In a landmark case, the court sided with McDaniel, Miller, and black residents, finding that the covenants did, in fact, violate the 14th Amendment. The victory wouldn't last. 15 years after residents won the right to remain in their homes, the California Highway Commission seized much of the neighborhood through eminent domain and demolished it for construction of the Santa Monica Freeway, I-10. Eric Avila, a historian and Chicano studies professor at UCLA, writes in the LA Times, "Black neighborhoods were considered to be blight. They were considered to be slums. The dominant perspective of the time was to eradicate blight, to get rid of the slums. The neighborhoods were simply wiped out, without any efforts to remediate the damage that was done." In the case of Sugar Hill, the word slum was used loosely. Across Southern California, freeways that paved over black and Latino neighborhoods were completed, such as the 5, 10, and 110 seen here. On the other hand, those proposed to cross whiter, more affluent areas were stopped. Highway builders often defended taking property in black neighborhoods by arguing that the land was cheapest there, a fact that relied on racist real estate practices and government-backed redlining policies that discouraged investment in black areas. In addition to the direct displacement of the communities in their paths, the freeways also facilitated neighborhood segregation. Created as walls to contain LA's growing black and Hispanic population from moving into the more desirable areas on the growing west side. The 10 cut Sugar Hill in half, taking many of the neighborhood's homes and mansions with it, and creating a wall across the community. What had once been a short walk between Hattie McDaniel's house and Ethel Waters was now over a mile. There's absolutely no question that it destroyed the neighborhood, says Cal State Northridge professor Josh Sides. Berkeley Square, one of the most wealthy sections of Sugar Hill, was entirely leveled.
Where's Berkeley Square now? Well, right here. Or at least it was. Now, of course, you're looking at the middle of the Santa Monica Freeway.
This 10 freeway, which is, of course, a major artery for Los Angeles now, would bisect and divide and essentially destroy what was, at the time, the most prosperous African-American community in Los Angeles, one of the most prosperous on the West Coast.
Dr. Ruth J. Temple was among the...
Now, have you noticed that they called Sugar Hill, but you heard him say that Sugar Hill was an affluent Black American community, meaning it was not slums. But in the document, they put the word slum village or slums in there because it was a way to divide. Every time we had a prosperous dwelling, it was taken over. But let's carry on.
Those displaced by the freeway. Dr. Temple lived at 5 Berkeley Square and was among the first black women doctors in California. She was a leader in providing free and affordable health care to underserved communities in Los Angeles, establishing the Temple Health Institute in East Los Angeles. Dr. Perry Beal lived with his family at 7 Berkeley Square. Dr. Beal was one of the first black doctors in Houston, Texas. He moved to LA in mid-1952, where he continued to practice. Reverend Pearl Wood lived at 19 Berkeley Square. 19 Berkeley was a hotspot for events in the neighborhood, regularly hosting some of Sugar Hill's largest gatherings. These are only some of the hundreds in Sugar Hill displaced by construction of the 10. In all, the highway would displace tens of thousands across the region. Shortly after construction of the freeway, the LA Sentinel wrote, "The road could have been built without cutting through Sugar Hill. However, in order to miss Sugar Hill, it was said that the route would have to cut through Fraternity and Sorority Row around USC. Fraternity Row still stands, and Sugar Hill does not, so you know who won out."
So you clearly see that they had a red pill and a blue pill, and they chose the alternative. All right, so let's go to the next video. This is St. Martin, all right, the forgotten community of Kowaliga. All right, let's carry on.
But if you ask anyone down south, it is also one of the most popular destinations in the Cotton State. So, whether you're into adventures and heart-pumping activities, or looking for hiking trails and stunning viewpoints, or trying to enjoy the slow tempo of the South, spiced with a bit of comfort food, Lake Martin is a place for everyone to enjoy. One of Lake Martin's landmarks is the famous Kowaliga restaurant, sitting far out into the lake on a peninsula. One can recognize it by a tall wooden statue of an Indian standing in the front of the restaurant. It's the very same wooden Indian from Hank Williams' song, Kowaliga, the story of a wooden Indian who fell in love with an Indian maid. However, not many people know that some 80 feet beneath the waterline lies the town of Kowaliga. Even though one of the rare prosperous majority black communities in the South at the turn of the 20th century, Kowaliga is now nothing more than another chapter in the less-known history of the United States. The history of Kowaliga is a short but fascinating story of a thriving black community. It's a tale of a group of men and their families determined to build lives out of the ashes of the Civil War in the racially segregated South. In just a half-century, the hard-working black men and women turned a neglected land along Kowaliga Creek into a promising industrial and farming community. Its development, however, was interrupted by the same progress they strived for. Kowaliga and the entire area along the Tallapoosa River found themselves in the way of the Alabama Power Company, which in 1916 obtained the right to build a dam on the river. When the dam was finished in 1926, life for the Kowaliga community and other settlements along the river ended. Once the dam gates were closed, the river flooded the area and sent Kowaliga into the depths of the newly created Lake Martin. Back in the days after the Civil War, Alabama was still a dangerous place for black people. Even though President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, many black slaves were still held in bondage in Alabama and other states of the South. A slave named John, who worked on a plantation in Kowaliga Creek, had become a free man after the war ended. Free, but all alone, John decided to build his life from scratch. He took the surname of his master, James Benson, and went to look for his lost sister. During the age of slavery, it was a common thing to separate family members. John's sister was separated from him when they were still children and was sold to a landlord in Florida. John undertook a risky endeavor, wandering the lands of Florida, but was finally rejoined with his sister. Together, the two of them returned to Alabama, where John found a job in Cahaba Field coal mines in Shelby County. Mining coal was a difficult job, even for the work-hardened man John was. He was paid only 60 cents per ton mined, but managed to save $100 by 1880. It was quite a large amount of money for anyone at the time, let alone a former slave. The money was the initial capital that John Benson used to buy land along Kowaliga Creek. Good crops and the favorable price of cotton allowed John to grow his wealth. Finally, after a decade of hard work, he had enough money to buy 160 acres of his former master James Benson's land, the land that was part of the very same plantation where he used to work as a slave. John was anything but an idle man. He worked day and night on his cotton farm. Unlike the old times when he worked for food and shelter, now his hard work paid off. By 1898, John Benson accumulated substantial wealth. He had over 3,000 acres of land, a brickyard, a sawmill, a grist mill, and a cotton gin, with a compressing mill. Along with 40 other families, both black and white, he planted corn, cotton, and sugarcane. 1,000 acres of his land, covered with pine, oak, and hickory, provided abundant resources for the sawmill. Once an enslaved man, John Benson was now a wealthy landowner. His most significant wealth, however, was the community of farmers he created. Each of them had a job and a house of his own. There was even a tiny cabin schoolhouse where kids were provided basic education. It was something most black people in the South could only dream of. The community John Benson created was just an indication of what Kowaliga was about to become. John's son, William Benson, inherited his father's vision of creating a prosperous black community and took it to a higher level. William was one of 3 children John and his wife Julia had. John insisted all his children were provided a proper college education. William started his education at Fisk University and finished it in 1895 at Howard College in Washington with a Bachelor of Arts degree. Even though people expected the young man to stay up north and build his career in a more emancipated environment, William decided to return home. The desire to improve a community his father started to create was stronger than anything else. In 1895, when William returned home, eager to build up his community, Alabama was still far from an emancipated society. However, the period between the Civil War and the turn of the 20th century was marked by some progress in relations between blacks and whites in the South. One could have even seen both sitting together in a restaurant or a theater. On the other side, in 1895, at least 8 black men and women were lynched in Alabama. For this reason, William's ideas were even more important for improving the conditions of life for the black people in the South. Being a man of education himself, William knew that the only way to reach prosperity was through education and started collecting the funds to build a school. William's father, John, recognized his son's ideas and helped him by donating 10 acres of land for the school campus and lumber for the school building. 2 years after the project started, the Kowaliga Academic and Industrial Institute was finished. William managed to gather some prominent names in the school board, including Clinton Joseph Calloway, the school's first director, and Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute for Negroes. The peculiarity of the school was that its goal was not to produce highly educated students. Instead, William intended to train the students for life and work in their home community, and prepare those ambitious to gain additional education in more developed educational centers. He thought that skilled and educated workers were necessary to build up the economy, which would spur the community's overall progress. To achieve this goal, in 1900, William Benson organized the Dixie Industrial Company, an enterprise where students could put their training into practical use. Such a company was planned to take the Kowaliga farming community to a new, higher level, transforming the natural resources into finished goods for sale. In the same way, he established the Kowaliga Academic and Industrial Institute. William did a marvelous job setting up an industrial center for the village. Dixie Industrial Company comprised one of the most modern sawmills in the South, the largest turpentine distillery in the region, and a cotton ginnery. The company's farming business spread over 10,000 acres of land and employed 300 people, of which 30 were whites. Black and white families of the Kowaliga community lived and worked in relative harmony. William's ideal was to secure a job for all of them, including children in the school. His plans went far beyond this, as he wanted to attract black people from other villages to come to Kowaliga. In 1898, he declared an intention to spend more of his own money to build a new community for poor black families. He hired William Gray Purcell for the job, at the time a student of architecture, and got the sketches for the dwellings and the town center done. Unfortunately, the project was abruptly abandoned when an angry white mob, jealous of Benson's wealth, lynched a black man and stormed William's house. The setbacks were many, as most white folks were unwilling to see the Kowaliga black community thrive. William Benson, however, never backed away. He never lost hope for a better tomorrow, not even when Kowaliga Academic and Industrial Institute was burned to the ground. Instead, he started it all over, gathered contributions, and ultimately built a new school campus. There was no end to William's plans and will to develop his small community. One of the things that they still lacked in the first decade of the 20th century was proper communication infrastructure. Kowaliga was connected to nearby towns with curvy, often muddy mountain roads. It affected not only the transport of people, but of goods as well. The solution was to build a railroad. William got to work and convinced several English and Canadian firms to finance the railroad that would connect Kowaliga with Alexander City. In 1914, the first black-owned railroad in the United States was opened. 16 miles of railroad connecting Kowaliga to the Alabama Railway Network allowed Dixie Industrial Company to transport lumber and other goods to large trading centers and seaports. The railroad proved itself a great success, as Dixie Company began exporting goods to Europe, with Germany being a major customer. That same year, the downfall of the Kowaliga community began. When the war started in Europe, the Atlantic port was closed, and the Dixie Company lost an important market. In the following year, due to financial problems, William Benson lost control of both the Kowaliga Academic and Industrial Institute and the Dixie Industrial Company to the Board of Trustees. His already aggravated health worsened, and in October 1915, William Benson died. He was buried on the campus of the Kowaliga Institute, the place he invested his whole life into. In 1916, the Alabama Power Company obtained the right to build a dam on the Tallapoosa River and sealed the destiny of the Kowaliga community. When 10 years later, the water began to fill the creek and form Lake Martin, Kowaliga Industrial and Academic Institute closed its doors. The community of thriving black people ceased to exist. Almost a century later, thousands of people passed the Kowaliga Bridge on Lake Martin, unaware that beneath them, the remains of the picturesque village, a community of black people who strive to build themselves a life worthy of man. For more videos on the most amazing...
Okay, as you clearly can see, it's not like blacks didn't put into effect to have our own towns. We actually did. All right, so let's play some. I'm not going to play all of this, but let's play some. All right, let's see something, because I don't want to play 16 minutes. Let's see. That's Vox. I don't want to get... well, let's play this. This is a little shorter.
Village was a community of African American, Irish, and German immigrants that existed in the 19th century in an area that was known as the Pre-Park area. It was roughly between 82nd and 89th Streets, between 7th and 8th Avenues in New York City. There were about 300 people that lived in the community, particularly towards the end and towards its demise. And we've been on this mission to find descendants to help tell this story.
So as you can see, when it came down to black neighborhoods, they promised black Americans 40 acres and a mule, right? But when it came down to taking over black Americans' neighborhoods, they used the power of eminent domain to take it over. All right. So what is now Central Park used to be Seneca Village. All right, let's carry on.
Andrew Williams was one of a number of African Americans who were free, and in 1825, Andrew Williams purchased land in Seneca Village for $120, which was a lot of money then.
Andrew Williams was one of the early settlers of Seneca Village. He was there in the very beginning and he was there at the very end. He was a bootblack, he shined shoes for a living. Later he was a cartman. And he was someone that we were really, really interested in and really wanted to try to make connections.
I've been able to find 4 generations, and one of the descendants is Andrew Williams' great-great-great-great-granddaughter, the 4th great-granddaughter, Ariel Williams.
Cal Jones reached out, and I remember that first week of us connecting, we had so many calls and try to help him connect all these missing puzzle pieces and connect my entire family back to Seneca Village.
And she is like the family historian, and she gave me some understanding of everyone in the family. All the men were named Andrew Williams.
So the name Andrew Williams continually gets carried over throughout the entire family, and the only variation is the middle name changes. It's absolutely crazy.
So look at that first date, 1794. So when people tell you that they don't know where they come from and this, that, and the third, you can actually track possibly where you come from, with if you was part of a tribe, because they had Black Americans as part of a tribe, because we was in this country thousands of years, and clearly you can see that he was born in 1794. So it's not like we just got here. And don't think that your life started with slavery, because Andrew Williams was a free man. So he wasn't a slave. So every Black American in the country was never a slave. So don't think like that. But let's carry on.
Crazy that they all look alike and the name is still carried out to this day, and my brother also being named Andrew Williams.
And the women had started with A rhyming and being as close to Andrew as possible, right down to Ariel. So it showed a lot of family pride. Andrew Williams was not a formally educated man, but he's a sharp man. You could see it in the moves that he made. He immediately protested about the takeover, first of all, but it seemed as though he felt his property was worth about $4,000.
As the records show, Andrew Williams was offered an amount for his space in Central Park to get him out, and he responded to that request with a counter stating, I should be at least given this much money. Unfortunately, that was not an agreement that was made, and they were actually given way less money and forced to leave the park.
So he did the protest, but of course it didn't matter, it didn't work. Then they took the property. He got paid $2,335 in April of '56, and by June of '56, he had purchased land in Newtown. So here's a man that he didn't waste any time.
Through kind of my studies and my understanding of the Williams family from all the research that I've done, we were very resourceful people. And with this new land, he was able to really start to invest in Andrew Williams II's education. He was the first one that was able to read and write, invest in other different things as well, and continue to be a property owner. And so after Andrew Williams II, Andrew Williams III was a very educated person, a musician as well, and actually traveled the world and attended what is now Columbia's music school today. And he had a son, they moved to California. My grandfather started a security business that my father worked with him on, and they're both in law enforcement, and we kind of grew up in California the rest of our lives.
What is really meaningful is to find a family in a time when it was very difficult for blacks to survive, let alone free. And to see someone who was taking care of a family, working and saving his money, and always showing a sense of family.
Being in the park where Andrew Williams' house was located was really a little bit overwhelming in a good way, and that so many people would be interested in learning more about my story and about my family and our involvement with Seneca Village and where we went after that and what happened after that.
What Seneca Village has put into focus for me is the importance of history.
History is just absolutely the center of everything that we do. It can have a profound effect on who we are as people.
Now I feel very connected to not only my father, but my family. I understand the pride behind my name and understand where I came from and the traits that I took from those people and why my father was the way he is and why I am the way I am today.
History is great. You have to know your.
Okay, I'm going to stop this video here because I'm not sure, because of the music, if they're going to make me mute the video anyways. Let's go with Susannah, Alabama. This is another town that's now underwater. So let's carry on. This next video.
Of Susannah, the forgotten community. On December the 31st, 1926, Alabama Power Company dedicated giant Martin Dam across the Tallapoosa River, flooding over 40,000 acres under what is now Lake Martin. Only 2 towns had established on or near of the banks of the river, stretching from well above Horseshoe to its union with the Coosa to form the Alabama River. One of those towns was Tallahassee, located at the future site of another dam at the Great Falls, and named after the Upper Creek warrior village of Tallahassee, for miles downriver. The other town was a small farming community with a post office, a bank, a sawmill, a grist mill, its own gold mine, and several other businesses. It was called Susannah, and it would be flooded by the waters of Lake Martin. Not so much is known about the founding and early history of that fated community now lost forever, but its location was in the vicinity of the beautiful bluff above the Tallapoosa River, and the Murphs once made their home. Susannah was actually centered just south of the original Murph compound, a few hundred yards up Blue Creek flowing from the east. Perhaps it is not too much to imagine or too romantic the name Susannah might have been altered from its original Susquehanna, and that Saul and Callister Murph's little settlement was the first non-Indian town on the majestic Tallapoosa, ancient and revered homeland of the once mighty Muskogee Nation. In the early 20th century, the Tallapoosa River flowed through Cherokee Bluffs, a deep gorge with high rock cliffs on both sides that was a popular picnicking area. The river is the dividing line between Tallapoosa and Elmore counties. As early as 1916, Alabama Power Company began acquiring options and purchasing land to be flooded, and many families had left the area long before the company completed the 168-foot-high dam that stretched 2,000 feet across the Tallapoosa River Gorge at Cherokee Bluffs. The communities of Susannah and Benson, including several houses and churches, were razed, and the company relocated 12 cemeteries containing 923 graves. One of the earliest settlements in Tallapoosa County, now partially covered by Lake Martin, was Susannah. It was located in Blue Creek between what is now Curry's Point and Stillwaters. During the mid-1800s and until Martin Dam was completed in 1926, Susannah was a thriving community. The community was a proposed farming area. The businesses included a general mercantile store, a bar, a post office, shingle mill, grist mill, sawmill, gin, a gold mine, blacksmith shop, a school, and a church. Susannah was a stagecoach stop for the main stagecoach route that originated in Maryland and came through Georgia and into Alabama. The stagecoach made its way from Susannah to the old Georgia Road. The relay station and hotel were located approximately 2 or 3 miles south of the community. Another black town drowned. Please, you all, do.
Okay, so if you keep in record, that's already the Willard family had to give up their property for eminent domain. You had Sugar Hill had to give up their property for eminent domain. That's number 2. So we coming up to 7. This is another town that in Portland here that refused to allow. So we're at 7. This is the 7th one. So you had 3 floodings. Well, one got fat financially because of a war, and then you had three floodings. Lake Lanier. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's Lake Martin. That's 2, and now Susannah. That's 3. All right, that's now underwater. Then you had 2 properties that was given up for eminent domain, but the one in Vanport was actually an area that was a division to keep blacks out of Portland, because what people don't know, Portland at one point was one of the most prejudiced places in the country. But let's go ahead and give a history of Vanport.
Welcome back to the story. How are the commercials? Good? Good. Before the break, we were talking about how the city denied the right-wing group, the Proud Boys, a permit to rally this Saturday in North Portland. The official reason being because of coronavirus. The city just isn't handing out permits to protests of any kind. And we checked on this. They haven't for the time being. But for Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, there's another reason to oppose the rally, and it has to do with where the Proud Boys want to gather. Wheeler wrote an op-ed in the Portland Tribune saying, on Saturday, September 26th, a group of far-right extremists and white nationalist groups will be coming to our city. They have announced plans to gather at Delta Park, the location of the historic Vanport city, which has important historical context. He continued, Vanport was created as a temporary housing project to keep black residents out of Portland. It was also the site of a devastating flood in 1948. Intentional or not, these groups choosing Delta Park for this event is an insult. Now, the history of Vanport is a long one, and it touches on some really raw topics that we're still grappling with today. For more, let's go into the KGW vault.
The city of Vanport was built during World War II in North Portland, right where Delta Park is today. At the time, it was the second largest city in Oregon and the largest federal housing project in the country, home to more than 40,000 people. About 40% of the population was black. Most people worked in the Kaiser shipyards for the war effort, but a lot of them left town when the war ended. By 1948, the population had essentially been cut in half, and that is when disaster struck. On Memorial Day, the Columbia River breached the railroad levee, spilling into Vanport and destroying the city. At least 17 people died.
It was the worst weather disaster in the United States in 1948. And so it had national and international news. President Truman came and he said we should rebuild it. However, the city fathers at that time did not want it rebuilt. They wanted Vanport essentially gone and erased, which is part of the reason that so few people know about Vanport today.
But the city left a legacy behind, helping integrate Portland and Oregon, a state that not long before had very few black people due to its black exclusion laws.
These were strangers, 40,000 strangers, who created a community. And when that community was disrupted, they brought that community feeling right into Portland and changed it from extremely conservative to what we have now.
The issues of home, displacement, and community that Vanport really helps us dig into are still clearly issues that the whole country and the city of Portland are facing. I mean, the city of Vanport was built because there was not enough housing.
The Vanport Mosaic Festival is held every year in May, complete with a day of remembrance, to talk about the history of Vanport and what our community can continue to learn from it.
The vault is one of our most popular segments.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, my headphones just died. I'm going to turn off these headphones, and we're going to listen to a survivor of Vanport. So let me go to remove my screen, move myself from the screen. And now I'm going to that's not what I want to do. I want to
and the flood was in May 30th, 1948. We were told, my mother was told, I was 8, and so my memories are from recall and from my mother keeping history alive in the family. She received a notice under the door the morning of saying that everything's all right, don't worry, we have things under control. And at 2 o'clock and Sunday afternoon, May 30th, the dike broke, which was Marine Drive, and the floodwaters from the Columbia River came into the area which is now East Delta Park. Everything we had and everything we had saved up, all of our documents that we brought with us, and the children's birth certificates and their school records, all of that, everything was lost. Except our lives, which is a blessing. I had twin brothers who were in the theater, because that was on Sunday, May 30th and 48. After they had gone to church, they went to a theater. My mother asked to be favored by God to allow her children, her 2 sons, not to drown. And if he permitted that to happen, if they came back home safely, we would never, ever go to a theater on Sunday. We honor that for generations later. The bus behind them went down in the water, and they got home safely. But beyond that, there's so many memories of bodies floating on the water, mothers holding their dead babies in her arms, people on housetops, memories that I will never forget. Listen, so many people, I'm amazed, that have never heard of it. It was something that happened, and it has not been kept in forefront of conversation and or history or in the news, and so they haven't heard of it for that reason, and they were born after 48. I know there's a need for not only recognition but keeping history alive, and when you think about how far those people have come who are survivors, their story needs to be heard. We don't know where we're going until we know where we've come from. Our history of yesterday is a part of our today and ongoing as far as our tomorrow, because that's a legacy. And out of that experience, out of that disaster, out of that tragedy have come new life, new hopes, a new vision, and hopefully will help restore some of what have been considered the lost city.
Okay, so I clearly want to showcase different times where towns have been flooded, eminent domain. I displayed what's there now in some of these places that we travel every day, but now we get to see what's taking place in these towns. I don't even know if this video can be monetized, because some of the videos, they have music, and YouTube have a very strict policy on some music. So for now, I'm really not sure, but nevertheless, this is Antonio with Team Tiggio. If you like these type videos, please let me know in the comments. But nevertheless, we'll be coming to you more videos in the future. And once again, we'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, as we on the road to 5,000, and we really, really need your help. So don't forget to like and subscribe, as we'll be coming to you more videos in the future.